Hi guys! This is Nicole Rosamar from PLM College of Nursing, BSN 35, and for our last and final video in Nursing Informatics, we are going to talk about managing clients using electronic medical record. So basically, what is EMR? So maybe some of you heard it or familiar with it just like me before, but are not totally oriented on how this system works. Well, in this video, I am going to show you a little bit of demo on how this EMR works using the OpenMRS system. I'm also going to tell you the benefits of using EMR and accessing information related to EMR. So, let's start. So, what is EMR? EMR, or Electronic Medical Record, is an electronic record of health-related information on an individual that can be created, gathered, managed, and consulted by authorized clinicians and staff within one healthcare organization. So, how does this work? To give you a brief background, let's take a look at the nurse-patient scenario. Imagine going to the hospital and upon entering, the nurse greets you and asks for your demographic and all of your necessary health information, including the assessments. While collecting your data, you notice that she is using her computer and record all of the assessment made using EMR. After saving your health information, it can now be securely shared to your physician or your other healthcare providers. Basically, electronic medical records are just a digital version of paper charts, but a more reliable, easy to track and monitor, and convenient version of charts. How does electronic medical record improve patient care? Let's talk about the benefits of EMR. Number 1, the provider can easily access the up-to-date information that is complete and accurate. Number 2, it allows securely sharing of information among the healthcare members since the EMR has access to authorized personnel only. Number 3, it reduces error caused by poor penmanship, which is a common problem in the traditional charting. Number 4, it improves in diagnosing diseases. And number 5, it promotes complete documentation. To guide us in using the EMR, specifically OpenMRS, I created this workflow. First, we have to log in using our account, then register the patient and enter the patient's demographic data. We start the visit, admit the client in inpatient, capture vitals, then visit note and enter the medical diagnosis and nursing care plan for the client. Then list all the patient's allergies as part of the baseline data, then check if the patient information has been recorded, then log out. So in MRS, you have to log in, so enter username, password, and then location for the session, which is in patient ward. Then register the patient. So in the demographic data, we can see the patient's name, gender, birth date, contact information, address, and even the relationship because some patients are underage or in a state they cannot do decisions for themselves, so the relatives is there to get the information and decision. So the demographic data is basically the identification of the patient. And here we're also going to put the contact information such as address and phone number of the patient, and in the relationship section, we're going to enter the relatives, which is the patient's brother. So now we have to double check everything that we entered are correct in order to prevent error. So save. And the next, start a visit, confirm. Since the patient is under the outpatient ward, we're going to admit the patient in inpatient. So since the patient is not contagious, we're not going to put the patient in an isolation ward. Next, capture vitals. So enter the height, weight. So the BMI is already calculated by the system, and enter the other BMI. Vital signs are important because it provides baseline data that we can compare after the care rendered to determine if the interventions are successful. Also, it provides data that needing emergent care, and it gives us an idea on the care that we will be rendering and guide the healthcare providers in making diagnosis. Like for example, in this case, the RRNP of the patient is above normal, and knowing this, we can tell that the patient respiratory status is compensating. So we have to confirm submission. So it is important to know if the information we entered are correct. So we have to double check everything. So next, visit note. So in visit note, we're going to put the patient's medical, we're going to enter the patient's medical diagnosis, which is automatically read by the system. In this case, the patient has asthma. And then we're going to create the clinical note, which is the nursing care plan. In the visit note, we are creating a nursing care plan for our patient. So care plan will serve as a framework for the care that we will be rendering to our patient. It allows the interventions to be recorded and evaluate their effectiveness in order to provide safe, quality, and continuity of care. After entering the medical diagnosis, we're now going to create our own nursing diagnosis and our own nursing care plan. So medical diagnosis and nursing diagnosis very different from each other because they're a separate entity, because they have different evaluation, different interventions, outcomes, and different actions to be made. For our nursing diagnosis, so nursing diagnosis will be the basis in creating holistic care or interventions for our patient. So right here in the case, the diagnosis or the nursing diagnosis of asthma is ineffective airway clearance related to ineffective coughing as manifested by the assessment that we gathered earlier. So right here, we also have the assessment. So the assessment provides us data that we can compare throughout the procedures to see if the patient condition is improving or not. And we have two kinds of assessment, the subjective data and the objective data. The subjective data are the data that was verbalized by the patient. So basically, it is the chief complaint, and the objective data listed are the data that we gather from physical assessment of our patient. As you can see here, the vital signs, the physical assessment, and health history are all included in the assessment. So for our desired outcome, so the desired outcomes will guide us to have a picture of what our goals are. So basically, these are the goals that we need to achieve in order to have a quality care that we will be given to our patient. So for our primary outcome in the case for our patient is to maintain a patent airway. So for our interventions, as you can see, I put the interventions or the actions that I can use for my nursing diagnosis, which is an effective airway clearance. So in this diagnosis, I adhere to the rubric or the accessing health information rubric in order to identify the sources that it is reliable and valid for my patient. So here, the interventions are basically for the patient with an effective airway clearance, and the interventions is very unique to specific patients. As you can see here in the intervention for our case, the primary interventions that we are going to do is to maintain an effective airway for our patient and to teach the patient to do effective coughing, especially that the patient primary problem is ineffective coughing. So as you can see in the interventions that we made is based for the patient specifically. So we encourage our patient to do interventions or to do actions that may maintain their airway patent, and also we administer medications and oxygens that are prescribed by our physician. So next is for our evaluation. So we need to evaluate the data to determine if there's any improvement or complications that happen to our patient. It is also important because the evaluation data will tell us if the care is still needed and if we need to assess again the patient or to create another nursing diagnosis or to create another nursing care plan. So in the case, we evaluate the response of the patient to medications, interventions, and actions performed, and we also evaluate the lung sounds, and we can assess the patient again in order to know if there's any progression and complication that happened to our patient, like if the patient can verbalize the cause and can understand the therapeutic regimen of asthma and how to prevent attacks of asthma. So upon entering, we have to check everything if the nursing care plan we entered is correct. Okay. So as you can see, here are the encounters that we made: the admission, vitals, and the visit note. In this form, you can see the patient recent visits, the vitals, the latest observations. So basically, these are the information that we gather. Next is we're going to enter the patient's allergies. So add a new allergy. So the patient said that he is allergic to peanuts, and his reactions are cough, headache, itching, and rash. And another allergy is he is allergic to carrots. And we're going to enter the reactions for that certain allergies, like anaphylaxis, cough, diarrhea, headache, itching, and rash. Then we're going to save it. Okay, go to the patient's chart, electronic chart. So next is go to the patient's electronic chart or the information. Before ending the patient's visit, we have to double check if the health information of the patient is being recorded to the system in order to prevent error. So in double checking, we can go to the find the patient and we can type the patient name, or we can also find them using their identifier. So after clicking it, you can see that the patient records will be shown. So you can check the patient's records one last time to see if there's any lapses. If none, before ending the patient's visit, log out your account. So logging out your account is very important in order to prevent hacking, promote the safety of the EMR and the patient's records. So that's how the EMR works. We also need to remember that in doing the plan of care of our patient, we have to check the health information's reliability and validity, especially the interventions or the actions that we are going to give to our patients. Because as a healthcare member team, it is our responsibility to provide safety to our patient, to provide quality care without putting the patient's life at risk. So in this video, I used the accessing health information skill rubric in order to validate my health information. So in the skill model, first I identify the questions or the diagnosis, which is asthma. Then I locate resources like books or internet websites. Then analyze for validity and reliability of the resources used. For my reference, I use the Davis Nurses Packet Guide for diagnosis, prioritize interventions, and rationales. I use the CARP test and SMART test that I have learned in CLO 3 to use in evaluating my sources, especially if it is website. And the book that I have used is reliable and valid because it adhered to the CARP test and the SMART test. So that would be all. Thank you for watching my videos and I hope you learned something today. And see you next time. Bye!